So a couple weeks ago, I'm chatting with a non-mathematical friend of mine, and I tell him how busy I've been. I've been refereeing so many papers, I hardly have any time to work on my own work. And then he kind of looks at me and says, "What's refereeing?" So let's talk about it. Hi, and welcome back to Math and Tea, the show where we talk math and drink tea. I'm your host, Professor Joseph Vandehei. Today's tea, by the way, is probably too light to read. This is from Presto George Coffee and Tea Specialist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it's a black currant tea, one of my absolute favorites. This one's a good one. Anyway, if we're going to be discussing refereeing, we really have to discuss the whole peer review process because it's essentially what the peer review process is in mathematics. So let's consider how a paper goes from a written paper to a published paper and all of the little steps in between. So let's say that you have just finished writing a math paper. What do you do with it? Typically, although not universally, the first thing you'll do is upload it to a pre-publication archive, such as the archive. That's ARXIV, not ARCHIVE. Anyways, this is done very often because the whole publication process can sometimes take years. So people want to get their results out there so that other people can look at them and work with them and appreciate them. Places like the archive, however, are not really considered publications, just because just about anyone can toss just about anything onto the archive. There have been some results, even some major results, which have been tossed on the archive, and that was their publication. But again, this is very uncommon. But again, if you are a typical mathematician, once you've written a paper, you want to submit it to a journal for them to publish. In fact, you'll typically submit it to a particular editor at a particular journal. Now, this is something that's a little bit different. If you read like a literary journal or a newspaper, there is typically an editor, or maybe a managing editor with sub-editors beneath them. This is not always the case in a mathematical journal, where there might be a dozen or more editors working for a particular journal. Good stuff. So when you submit your paper, you're looking for the editor who understands your area the best. So here's where things get a little unusual. You finish writing your paper and you submit it to a particular editor at a particular journal. But that editor might not actually be qualified to give an informed opinion about the quality of your paper. Again, if you're submitting a paper to a particular editor, that editor should be close-ish to the topic of your paper, but they don't necessarily have to be an expert on it. That's not their primary job at this stage. Generally speaking, one of the biggest jobs an editor has at this point is to find someone who actually is an expert on the topic of the paper. That is, a referee. So, you submitted your paper to the editor, and the editor now takes your paper and hands it off to a referee who's an expert on that particular question. The referee's job is now to read through your paper very carefully and compose a referee's report to the editor recommending what should be done with it. Generally, I would say there are three main things that a referee is looking for. Is it correct? Is it well written? And is it appropriate for the journal? But there's even disagreement on exactly what of those things should be done. For example, I know some referees who would say it's not their job to check the veracity of the proofs. That's the writer's job. And I know some referees who would say it's not their responsibility to check whether or not it's appropriate for the journal. That's the editor's job. And then there's referees like me who make lots of comments about grammar. Regardless, what we'll do is we'll write up a referee's report, we'll send that back to the editor, who will then make some decision and send that on to the author of the paper. Editors are free, by the way, to accept or reject the recommendation of the referee, which might include accepting the paper as is, rejecting the paper outright, or asking for revisions, which is probably the most common. If the referee and the editor like the paper, there will typically be a round or two of revisions, and this kind of repeats the whole process all over again. The writer will send it to the editor, who will send it on to the referee, who rereads it, writes a new referee report, kicks that back to the editor, who then reads this, makes another decision, and sends that forward to the writer again. It's possible that after all this revision, the paper could still get rejected, although that's not as common. Typically it gets accepted at that stage. And once your paper does get accepted, congratulations, it's getting published. Now all you have to do is worry about galley proofs and things like that. But That's all a topic for another day, because I'm out of tea. Anyways, see you next time. Bye.